is everyone's looking for a solution to get out of pain or a solution to fix themselves. And it's like, that's a small part of the equation. You need to find a practice that you enjoy doing and enjoy showing up to. Because if that is first and foremost, then the management of those other symptoms will lessen just from actually finding enjoyment in your training again. And then you'll actually continue to show up and you'll continue working on these things that, yeah, we all have like a right hip or shoulder that feels weird, or we're in an aging body, right? And we're just trying to continue to be our best. So I think that that's where the old time unconventional stuff can create excitement in training again, and get people feeling like, hey, I don't have to go do these exercises that are boring. After a while, it gets pretty boring. I can go do other things, and training can be fun. My name's Lucas Hardie. I am a coach, personal trainer. I've been working in the field for 20 years now, quite a long time. And I've had quite an evolution in my own practice and what I specialize in coaching. I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada, so it's quite far east on the Canadian side of the world. And I specialize more in flexibility training and strength training. More people come to me for flexibility training these days. And that presentation is a reflection of my own journey, going from a pretty broken, beat up old powerlifter, trying to figure out how to rebuild my body and move better, which has been what I've been sharing for the last decade on social media, which you can find me now under the tag Range of Strength.
Nice one, nice one. So you've hit upon the flexibility and the strength training. They're two things that tend to be seen as, polar opposites. What other kind of misconceptions do people have in regard to, working on strength and working on flexibility?
Well, I'll be the first to admit that I was the person who would say flexibility is only genetic. It's a waste of time. Stretching doesn't work. And of course, we are challenged by our bias when certain things happen in our life. And I had gone through a few injuries. I just started realizing that I wanted to change my movement quality, and that I never actually dove into flexibility training and stretching. And my first real exposure to that was getting into gymnastics training. So I was trying to learn and understand body weight strength methods. And a lot of what I wanted to do required a high level of flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, the big misconceptions there that you'll hear online, or that most people will say, which is mainly based off some botchy research, is that stretching will make you weak. It'll reduce power output, and that it will not have a positive effect on your strength. And it's just not true. Obviously,
Okay.
through that message that I share.
It's interesting because I've been seeing this. I've been seeing the rise in kind of unconventional lifts and old time kind of strongman lifts,
Yeah.
but I've also been seeing the rise in. You use this term in one of your videos. It was the evolution of mobility training, and you use this term kind of like a bubble wrap philosophy, or bubble wrap approach,
Yeah.
where you have to be very almost overly careful of certain movements that you do. And there seems to be a rise in people that are, how do I say it? They're policing form quite heavily.
Yeah.
And, things like, I've noticed there's like almost like a backlash against deep squats,
Mm.
and um, like I can understand the issue with excessive stretching. I can see how that could be a problem,
Yeah.
being overly flexible. But there seems to be a backlash against almost flexibility, carte blanche. So, like, how do you tackle kind of those kind of critiques about the flexibility and the policing form? And
Yeah. Well, anything's unsafe that you haven't been exposed to, right? So it's easier to tell someone that the thing that you're bad at is unsafe, because I see it more as individuals or potentially coaches just not really knowing how to coach that or fix those
Mm,
problems. So instead of diving deeper, it takes a lot of work it takes years to figure out how to help people with these things. It's easier just to say, just don't do it. And,
mm,
at the end of the day, people can exercise and get fit and probably avoid a lot of ranges of motion. But I think the message there is like, what happens when you are exposed to that range of motion, right?
mm,
So you could take someone who's fit, they work out all the time, and then all of a sudden they're just exposed to a very deep knee flexion, or they're exposed to a rotated, rounded back position just through life, and then there's a mishap, then there's a setback. And when we get into this discussion of injury prevention, which, yeah, a lot of the research has shown that you can't really prevent injury with stretching. My thought process here is this: if someone was to use stretching and flexibility to expose themselves to these positions and ranges of motion and then get injured versus someone who hasn't, who is going to have the faster recovery? Who is going to be able to have more options with recovery? So I don't necessarily look at it as stretching prevents injury. I look at it as stretching is a solution to start exposing ranges that aren't frequently exposed or that you haven't found a way to expose yourself to. So
mm.
if you think of it more as low grade strength training, which is effective stretching is a form of strength training, it's isometrics in a static position, then we start thinking about now we have an option for training these positions that we don't train. So why wouldn't you want to do that? Right.
And is this specific to, so, with regard to your clients, is this specific to performance or is this specific to kind of like the everyday person, everyday functionality?
Well, there's not much difference there, is there? It's just that one is doing it more frequently versus one is just trying to become better overall. So, that is the other thing in the industry is always like, this is performance training and this is very specific. It's like they don't really differ that much. If anything, an athlete needs to be concerned a little bit more with their recovery and things like that before major events and all that sort of thing. But especially the approach to improving flexibility, it doesn't change much because really at the end of the day, no one really is doing it and no one is coaching it and exposing them to stretching the way it should be done. So most of the time, if I work with athletes or Gen Pop, it's the same process because they just never have been shown how to do it properly.
And what's like a um, common barrier that you find with these the performance athletes and the general population in terms of movement barriers? What's an issue that is particularly common across the board?
I just think even more so understanding how to coordinate the body because even flexibility and stretching, it is more about knowing how to coordinate positions and understand how to set your hips properly. So most
Hmm.
of us are walking around with probably 20% more flexibility than we're actually showcasing. We just don't understand how to move the body. We don't understand how the hips should help the spine set ourselves in a folded position. So at the start, even more so than anything, it's trying to get someone to understand those things. It's like your
Hmm.
pelvis needs to move this way and it needs to move that way. Your shoulders need to fully elevate and fully depress. And a lot of people lack that coordination. So then, of course, it's going to be harder to express your range of motion because you don't know how to
Hmm.
actually coordinate the body to express those things.
Okay. And do you think that do you think that the public and the general population are becoming more and more aware of this, and that's the reason for the rise in popularity of unconventional lifts? Or is it down to people like yourself who are really passionate about it and are kind of, posting pretty regularly online about, unconventional lifts and,
Yeah.
and flexibility and mobility?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a bit of both, right? Because there's like there's some sexiness to it where you're like, oh, I want to do that. It looks cool. And that's where I started with really getting deeper into the old time methods and old time lifts is like, oh, it just looks so
Mhm.
cool. But then
Mhm.
when you approach it holistically, you know that you now have options. You now have methods that have been around for hundreds of years for training these vulnerable positions. And then you can go through people that have practiced it at high levels and you can get coaching. And there's like this process of, all the things we love about the conventional things that we do, right? So a bit of both. And I do think mobility training, the evolution of it and how it's grown so much has helped expose us to like, hey, it's okay to do these moves. It's okay for you to round your back, for your knee to go over your toe, to rotate and twist and move, because in its essence, that's what mobility training is trying to introduce us to doing again. And then these old time unconventional lifts, they now allow you to go do that at a higher level. And it just creates for like a really fun environment and training again. And that's kind of missing these days is everyone's looking for a solution to get out of pain or a solution to fix themselves. And it's like, that's a small part of the equation. You need to find a practice that you enjoy doing and enjoy showing up to. Because if that is first and foremost, then the management of those other symptoms will lessen just from actually finding enjoyment in your training again. And then you'll actually continue to show up and you'll continue working on these things that, yeah, we all have like a right hip or shoulder that feels weird, or we're in an aging body, right? And we're just trying to continue to be our best. So I think that that's where the old time unconventional stuff can create excitement in training again and get people feeling like, hey, I don't have to go do these exercises that are boring. After a while, it gets pretty boring. I can go do other things, and training can be fun.
So that's one of the issues that I find with the people that are very kind of vocal on policing form
Yeah,
is the one thing I think that they miss out on is that the biggest issue that everyone has is staying consistent with their training
yeah,
or even training,
yeah,
even getting up off the sofa or whatever. So if you can throw some excitement into there, throw some unconventional lifts in there, then you kind of mitigate boredom.
yeah,
The squat's awesome, bench press is awesome, pull ups are awesome, but if you can, you know, kind of twist those and throw something in, it's gonna keep people stimulated, I
yeah,
think. And it's that risk reward of whether somebody trains or doesn't. Like it's important to just like keep the train rolling.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
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 and
yeah.
people want to just learn more about their body at the end of the day. Someone who's not doing a powerlifting competition or CrossFit, whatever, and they just want to learn how more about their body, it's a great avenue for that because now you're understanding how strength is applied or what your body wants to do and compensate for in these positions. And then you're actually learning to troubleshoot through that, which is, you know, if anything, it's completely outside of what we've been doing for the last 2 decades.
Mm. Your approach is very open, and you've been exposed to different. You've been exposed to the calisthenics, the gymnastics, the powerlifting. Um, is there anything that you have that you would steer clear of or advise someone against now with all the experience that you've had, or are you a kind of open to most movements and most practices?
I'm open to all of it in terms of like the idea of being a generalist and getting some exposure to certain things. And I have like gone deep enough in some areas where you just realize that specialization in certain things like contortion or really high level movements, they require you to really just do the one thing. Even powerlifting gets like that too, where it requires such a high degree of specialization that it takes away from your freedom to do a lot of other things. I think this message is getting better, and I do think when I reflect on my powerlifting years, uh, you kind of adapt that or adopt that mentality. Like I'm a powerlifter, and you just don't do stuff, so you don't do as much cardio, or you don't do as much other things that you probably could definitely do. You can fit that stuff in, you can still do it, but certainly, I think when it does come to like really chasing a goal, even the body weight stuff got to a point where I was training planche, and I remember talking to someone who was like, "You got to do it like 4 or 5 times a week," and I was like, "I don't really want to do that."
Mm,
It's not that I advise against that, but I think people do have to realize, or you do get to a point in your training where if you do want to obtain something that's a really high feat, you have to give up some stuff and create some
mm,
specialization or find a way
mm,
to do that. So you can definitely balance a lot of things really well, but there still
mhm,
is some specialization needed to get yourself to a high level if you want to achieve a goal. So, I mean, I don't advise against anything. I think it's just
mm,
be realistic with what you can do right now. And even for me, achieving a high level of flexibility in splits allowed me to then come back to a lot of things and integrate them together. So, there's always opportunity to come back and do other things. And you see that a lot with calisthenic athletes in the past. They obtained planche front lever and then they come back to weight training and they're kind of
mm.
building these skills in integrated.
It's yeah, it's interesting. So we spoke briefly about our connection on Instagram, from the very beginning, um, and with my personal journey and with physical itself, like I'm always torn between feats of strength, fitness, and health. And I think as I've got older, I'm kind of leaning a lot more towards the health side of things, less so the feats,
Mm,
a little bit more so the fitness. But it's that being pulled, from one thing to the other, and I feel like one of the reasons why I've kind of like dipped into this whole kind of podcast thing now is with when you're masked by a brand effectively, you kind of have to almost follow like a very central line. You can't really have an opinion, whereas when you're talking to people and you have an opinion, you share different things. um but you've recently turned 40, right?
yeah.
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 So you said that very 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 neatly. Yeah, yeah. I'm going to be 45 soon, so I know how it is, man. It's
Mm.
yeah, it's I didn't realize that I would get here so fast. But yeah, has your thoughts about training changed in respect of feats, fitness, and health,
Yeah.
or you're just enjoying the ride? You're just instinctively kind of doing your thing.
I don't know if it's changed too much. I think you get to a point though too where you do want to pat yourself on the back a little bit because if you're a very goal driven oriented type person, I feel like as I've approached my 40s, I'm now like, man, you've done good. Like give yourself a pat on the back. Like, you've done some things that are great and keep pushing. Like that's something that I've embraced more, not to be so hard on myself. I still am goal driven. I just try to think realistically about what I can do. And that's inspired me to get back into gymnastics this year more than I have in the last couple of years because I went deep into that old time lifting stuff and I learned so much and I'm still maintaining those qualities. And now I'm thinking about goals and I'm like, well, a handstand push-up would be pretty cool. And I never did truly tackle that last time I was doing gymnastics. So and it's a weakness, right? My overhead strength, like it's one of those things where I'm just trying to be a little more realistic with what I can and can't do. I don't think there's a limit to what you can and can't do. I'm not trying to say that, but I think, starting to set goals where it's like, I think I could do that. I could make some sacrifices to really push hard there and maintain my flexibility and my cardio and my lifting without, giving up too much. That's, I think, more where my head's at these days. But yeah, I think it's okay to give yourself a pat on the back. And I think obviously there's a lot of people out there that are just trying to get going, but there's also a lot of people that have been going, right? And they've been
Mhm.
pushing themselves and pushing themselves. And it's those people I feel like usually tend to start to approach the later middle age years and they kind of burn out because
Yeah.
we've just always been pushing. And I think that's just where I'm giving myself more freedom to say like, yeah, you've done well and just keep having fun and, maintain a lot of the things that you've enjoyed. I still like heavy squatting. I don't know if I'll hit new PRs in that anytime soon, but to feel like I can put a heavy weight on my back that's heavy-ish anytime I want and to do it, that's a pretty good freedom, right? So I think you manage your expectations and goals a little bit better. And I think most people, need to figure out how those goals intertwine. It's like you need to have some higher goals, you need to have some smaller goals that are maybe more about maintaining qualities and those kind of things.
The way in which you approach midlife is would be obviously very different to say like a general population client that comes to you. Um, are you seeing what do you see with uh, midlifers, with people around their 40s that come to you that perhaps haven't had much in the way of structured training? Is there a common issue, common ailment, common goals?
I think the most common is flexibility, right? Is most people, as they start to approach middle age years and they're trying to build the habit and training again, it's like I want to learn how to move better, and
Mhm.
they haven't thought about that, right? So if they have had a training history, it was kind of like the grit and go kind of mentality where you just go in and
Mm,
you go hard and you get
mm,
strong, or you build maybe a really high cardio base because you're a runner.
mhm.
And they just never have thought about that. And I think that's the challenge as you approach middle age years. You can't go do that anymore. You can't just go in the gym and just go crazy because everything feels kind of crappy. So you're trying to think like, how can I maybe get that myself built back up to that? Or is there just another more holistic option for strength training that I haven't explored yet, which is flexibility training? Flexibility training is strength training, like training to improve your range of motion qualities. Like, I think that's what a lot of more middle aged people are looking for. They're searching for those answers. And, you may find some programs that don't work for you, and you may find some that do. And I think that's where we just got to, like, my message is I know my program's not perfect for everyone, but I know I've helped enough people that the people that it does help will continue to find it. And I think just staying true to that message is important so that those people do find it when they're looking for it.
Okay, that's brilliant, man. And like maybe connected to that, like formerly you were known as the bodyweight dad.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, yeah. What was the reason for the switch? Was that just a marketing thing, a business thing, a change in era for you, or what's the deal?
Yeah, kind of. I wanted more from what I was doing online. I wanted to showcase more of my coaching background because
Hmm.
when I started that account, I was sharing my journey from broken powerlifter to learning gymnastics.
Hmm.
And I made really good progress, like with a transformation there. But it isolated me into a corner of like, I'm just this one thing. And I wasn't even able to showcase that I'm like a coach and I have a background in all these things. I was working for the military at the time as a physical fitness coordinator. So I think that's what it was for me, is like I didn't want to just pigeonhole myself into this one identity. And there's a lot of things that I haven't shared with people in terms of like the barbell stuff and just some of the other things. So it was an evolution of Bodyweight Dad. And it became even more focused around flexibility because that was also what people wanted from me the most. So,
Mm,
I did embrace that role along the way to say, like, I want to come up with better solutions for people when it comes to improving their flexibility. So
mhm.
I tried to step into that and own it and present it with some of the other skills that I had.
Okay, okay. And I'm gonna ask you for some advice now. As you were formerly the bodyweight dad, you still are obviously you still are a dad. I'm new to fatherhood, so my daughter she's going to be 5 in a couple of months. Um, it, is there are there lessons along your journey that you impart on your children?
Yeah, it's hard to have the, I guess, deeper talks. And I think, especially as they get older, you really have to make an effort to talk about those things like, you know, changes in life and, transitioning from elementary age to high school age. Like that's where my kids are going now. And it's funny, people say, like, oh, it gets easier. It just never gets easier. It just changes. Right. So,
Mhm,
you're trying to protect them from falling when they're 4 and 5, and you're trying to just put like certain habits into their naturehood. And as they get older, it's like, okay, we got to start talking about life, and we have to,
mm,
make time. Like it now requires me to sit down and really think about what I'm going to say. And that's a whole different energy. And,
mm,
from my upbringing, I know that was, it's a bit old school to like not really talk about those things. It's just like
100%.
you'll figure it out, right? But I've learned that I've just wanted that to deliver that more to my kids, and um, I think that's a message that is important to share. Is like make time to have those talks, make time to think about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Like I make mistakes, and don't be afraid to apologize for the mistakes you've made. Right. And that's
Mhm.
a big one for me, is just owning up to mistakes I've made, and, letting them know that like it's important to own up to your mistakes, and it's important to, you know, just represent yourself in a way that's has good moral ethics.
Mm. I think for me, one of my biggest fears is I'm into exercise, I'm into fitness, my partner's into exercise, she's into fitness. Are we going to raise somebody that won't enjoy fitness?
Yeah.
Is there something that you do to kind of inspire your kids to train and exercise, or they just naturally love it?
Well, I have 3 kids. So I have 2 boys and a girl, and the boys are quite physically active. And I made a good effort to get my daughter physically active. It did get to a point where she was around 10 or 11. She wrote this big long email.
Oh no, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it was more like along the lines like, I don't like basketball, and I don't like those things. And I want to explore acting, and I like drawing and arts and stuff. So, I mean, if anything, it was great that she was able to express that to me. I was like, wow, that's amazing that you feel like you're comfortable to share that with me. But by all means, don't feel like forced to do any of this. So in that scenario, it's like for me, it's just a matter of them knowing that like physical health is important. So ensuring that she understands, it's like you don't have to play sports, but there's things that you have to do, like, I'm introducing her to the gym, and just like I think that it's not being forced, but it's being said, this is the same as taking your vitamins every day. This is like, trying to instill that, where we're with the boys, it's been easier. They just kind of, they're going and they're asking questions and they're excited about it. In that scenario, it's become more educational, where I'm like, this is important and this is why it's important. And you have to at least kind of have that piece to it there. So I don't know. It's cool that she's finding her own thing, and that's most
Mm.
important. right? Expose them to as much
Okay.
as you can, and hopefully they find their own thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think for me, it's just making sure they understand the importance of health and taking care of yourself. It's like you don't need to be an athlete, but you need to go for a walk, and that's good for your
Mm.
mental health. And you need some physical exercise. It's good for your body. So yeah, it's a bit different, but it's fun.
Okay. Okay. Oh, I like that. You've. I mean, I guess the fact that she's into the creative is
Yeah,
maybe that's a little bit of a consolation as well. Like, or it would be a consolation for my daughter if she wasn't into fitness and she wanted to go into the arts. So I'd be like, okay, I can handle that. I can handle
yeah,
that. What was I gonna say? Okay, so you touched on the vitamin, like training and exercising, like it's
yeah.
taking your vitamins daily. So that's a segue into nutrition. Um, what are your? I guess this is probably a question that you get asked all the time,
Mm.
but kind of what's your standpoint with nutrition and also nutrition's kind of benefits and links to strength and flexibility?
I don't talk enough about nutrition. I've kind of gone to just focusing more on strength and flexibility, but I mean, I do my best to maintain a good diet. Um, I also don't, maybe I should share it because it would probably be funny. I have like the most boring basic diet in the world. Like I'm almost like a robot when it comes to eating. I just protein, carbs, blah. Like there's nothing fancy about it. I try to follow certain rules of thumb. There's been times where I've gone deeper with nutritional work, and like intermittent fasting was big for me when I had the transformation with gymnastics, more fasting work. I just never had done that. And like the big takeaway there is just that I think we don't spend enough time being hungry, right? And I think that's an important thing for someone maybe looking to lose weight is like it's okay for you to have longer periods of time when you're hungry. Like it's not this thing where it's like I'm hungry, I'm gonna eat a massive meal. Um, but I've done the carnivore thing as well too, and that was also just felt very similar to intermittent fasting. But now I'm eating a pretty basic standard diet now: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I ensure that because of my training demands that I'm eating a higher intake of protein. And
Mhm.
even with most of the people I work with that just require some help and support with that, that's often the hardest part is just eating more
Mm.
protein. Like as much as we have like food trackers and all these apps and everything nowadays, it's like, can you just eat enough protein each day to start? And that's sometimes the hardest part for people is like they just eat too much of the other stuff.
Mm.
So I make sure I do get my consumption of protein right now, body weight or slightly more, based on my energy outputs. And with the other things, I just try to make sure I'm eating cleaner kind of options for carbohydrates and lots of fruits. And the
Mm.
kids eat me out of house and home right now, so I'm pretty limited on what I can eat. But I think, basic stuff for me is like, can I hydrate myself enough each day that when I use the bathroom, it looks like I have a healthy, you know, go to the bathroom. Can I eat enough protein that sustain my training? If you're training hard enough, I'll always ensure someone's focusing on their training and training hard enough because I feel like, in my experience and people I've worked with, when you're excited about your training, you care more about what you're eating,
Me too.
right?
Mm.
And there's too many people that are focused so much on their eating. It's like, why don't you start exercising 3 or 4 times a week and try to build that up? You'll start giving a shit more about what you're eating because you know it'll affect your workouts. So I've always gone that route with like trying to instill that kind of mindset with people. And it usually makes it a lot easier to make healthier choices because you got to get up in the morning and train. And you know that what you eat before you go to bed is going to affect that. So I think it's more about just creating a healthier relationship with food. It's okay to have a slice of pizza, but if you have a slice of pizza 3 or 4 times a week, you know, it's like anything, right? So, um, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at these days with my nutrition. But I did do a bulk recently. Like, I don't,
Mm.
Like, it was a year ago, I trained to put some weight on, and it gets a lot harder as you get older. I don't know if you've done that
Yeah,
recently.
yeah,
Uh,
100%.
I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know how much more of that I'll be doing, but like trimming back down was quite hard. Like, I had to be really strict with my diet. I was hard. I was hanging on to more visceral fat a lot longer than I used to. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's easier for us when we train hard and we love training because we relate it to our training. It's like how we eat relates to how we train. So I've just kind of tried to adopt that with people is like get focused on your training, feel like you're exercising and enjoying that, and then we can get these eating habits in place.
I like what you said there about focusing on the training first, and the training then kind of will dictate or kind of lead into eating better.
Yeah.
Um, and it's that thing of, yeah, when you reach your 40s or late 30s, there seems to be a switch that goes off, where you can't get away with so much.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, it can be a little bit depressing. Yeah, a little bit depressing. Um, yeah, sorry, there's a question I was going to ask about there, but okay. So with your, because you do a lot of research into the old time lifts. Um, with your research, have you come across any kind of interesting and unconventional ways of eating that some of the old time strongmen kind of followed? Is there anything that kind of sticks out, or?
Well, I mean, I've like Vince Gironda had I mean, he was more in the silver era in the 50s and 60s. He had that like really high egg diet. Like, I forget how
Mm,
many eggs it was a day. I've never tried that. Like, I will say
okay.
that I haven't tried that dosage of eggs. I do eat a high amount of eggs a day, like 6 to 8 eggs a day, but
Mhm.
I try to. I can't hit that every day. But there are some unique things. But like this, our Saxon trio, Arthur Saxon, he was one of the strongest, leanest lifters, and he used to like drink a gallon of beer a day,
Wow.
you know,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it's like they had crazy high consumptions of protein when they could, um, but nothing too extreme. Like most of it was, 3 healthy meals a day, eat real food, because even back then there was processed junk that people
Mm,
were being given. So when you read a lot of the texts that they had written about eating, it was usually just trying to get people to steer clear from a lot of the new processed stuff and just to make sure they're still eating healthy doses of fruits and meats, that sort of thing. Max Sick, he was like the muscle control specialist. He pretty sure he was like vegan. He didn't eat meat. So that's kind of
mm,
interesting to see. Even back then there was like some differences in terms of like animal protein diets versus that sort of approach. And he still was one of the strongest and fittest guys out there. I've never tried that either, the vegan approach to things, but it's interesting to see that a lot of that was still being done back then. Um, but nothing too crazy. Like the Saxon brothers had a health tonic. So their
mm,
health tonic was a Guinness beer
mm,
with a couple raw eggs, brown
mm.
sugar, and vodka. It was either gin or vodka. So they would recommend, like in their books, they would be like, drink this before you train and you'll be really strong.
Okay. Okay. I think Guinness's tagline used to be, oh God, oh man, it's escaped me, but it's something, yeah, something about uh, drink this to be strong. See, okay, I should remember this. I should know this. My family originally from Nigeria, and Guinness outside of Ireland, Nigeria is one of the biggest drinkers of Guinness. Something like Guinness makes you strong, or something used to be their tagline. So yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. And how are you with drinking? Are you much of a drinker, or is that something that you steer clear of now that you've hit your 40s?
I definitely do not have as many casual drinks as I used to have when I was younger, like going and socializing with friends. I don't have anything against that. And, like drinking is, I mean, it's just something like I did when I was younger and I was just being a stupid kid to the point where I don't really think it's of any value to me now. But I still will have like casual glass of wine or casual beer, maybe just like a whiskey on the rocks or something on the weekends just to relax with a friend or with my wife or something. And I do find I approach my 40s now, like I don't do that even hardly at all because even still, like I am trying to stay more focused on my training, and that I just feel like all those little options just steer clear of it. But I'm not afraid to have a drink. Like I'm certainly not slapping myself on the wrist if the opportunity presents itself. A friend comes over and they want to have a casual drink, like for sure. But yeah, just again, balance. It's like the warrior mentality, warriorship. It's like it's okay to indulge, but you have to know your limits and you just have to openly, I think if you can openly talk about those things, you can ensure they don't get out of control, right? Because a lot of times that stuff is a quiet thing that we don't know about. And if you don't start vocalizing that, hey, this is a problem to someone that cares about you, then it's harder to maybe change those habits.
I hear that. I hear that. My my goal is to eventually hold my great grandbabies. Um, so, what is your, you kind of touched on there your future goals. What is your long term? Do you have a longevity goal? Do you have a, when I'm 90, when I'm 100 goal? Is there anything like that that kind of that steers you?
I would love to be able to do pull-ups in my later years. Like
Hmm.
80-year-old pull-ups are pretty badass.
Hmm. Hmm.
But as I do appreciate more movement from the ground than I ever have. And I still work on that. Like nothing too advanced, like or complicated, but spending some time on the ground every day, if it's just a kneeling position and just like getting up and down off the ground, I really value that. And I think in my head that that's going to carry over into my later years more than anything is just valuing time on the ground and having the mobility to move really well without constraints. I think that will play into my later years more than anything. So I just keep up with those movements that I have now and ensure that I don't lose them. But it would be pretty cool to knock out some pull ups in my later years for the grandkids to see.
How many?
Grandkids?
No, no. Well,
Oh,
yeah, grandkids, and also how many pull-ups?
well, I mean, I remember when I was younger, when I first started going to the gym, and I did see an older gentleman come to the gym and he started knocking out pull ups. And it was one of the more inspiring things I had seen. And it didn't look like he was having trouble with 5+ reps, anything like that.
Yeah,
Like he was in well shape and, he was handling himself well, but it was pretty cool to see him just start yanking pull ups. And that's even funny that
yeah.
a lot of people nowadays can't even do a pull up, right?
Mm.
And that was just an old standard. Like everyone did pull ups. Like no one even thought twice about it. Now it's like no one even hangs onto a bar because they're
Hmm.
old. It's like what?
Yeah.
What do you mean? So
It's I mean, what use, in our day and age, what use is there of like your arms kind of like above your head?
right,
It's kind of, it's become a movement that is, just has no application, but other than for our health, right?
yeah.
Um, talking of that, like, what are your favorite strength movements, and what are your favorite mobility and flexibility movements?
Well, the squat is my favorite. I've and it's not even because I'm just always have been good at it, but I've just practiced it so much and I've wanted to get good at it to a point where I just love squatting. It's also kind of like if I had the option, I would probably squat every day heavy and not do anything else. So I try not to lean into my strength as much and try to work on my other things, but the squat is my favorite when it comes to strength and the different options that it offers. I shared a post a couple of days ago with just like other squat variations, right? Because I share a lot of heavy squat tips, but the old school had a lot of variety. The Steinborn squat is a nice variation of the squat. There's just like a lot of different ways of training the pattern, which is, I think,
What's the Steinborg squat?
So Henry Milos Steinborn, he was an old time strongman, and there was events back then that would say who can. They would just have a certain weight on the stage, and it would just say who can lift this off the ground onto their shoulders. Like they would just come up with like things like that. So he walked up onto the stage and he tipped the bar over and he laterally placed it onto his traps and then he squatted down and tipped the weight and stood up. And it was like 550 pounds or something. And that's the Steinborn squat now is what it's called. So it's a good option if you don't have a squat rack. So you pick the bar up this way, you set it onto your traps, and then you squat down, and everything tips up.
Mhm.
So it is a cool one to just get a bit more creative and understand how your body shifts weight laterally. And that's even a pretty functional movement if you think about farmers or tactical athletes that have to farmer carry and things like that, fireman's carry. So yeah, that's a cool different way to think about training your squat. And I went pretty hard in that when I was getting into it as well too, like challenge, see how heavy I could go with it. Um, Flexibility movements. I would have to say, I mean, to say something like the splits would be, I don't know if I love the splits as much as I love the regressions and stuff for it. So, like these fundamental stance positions that you see in martial arts, like the horse stance, long lunge positions, like I really love those movements because they offer so much bang for your buck in just one exercise. So you can get build a high level of strength in a more outer range position specific to splits. But for everyday person, you can just think about like the value in being strong in those positions, regardless if you have a goal for splits, right? Um, and maintenance of your flexibility. There's so many variations that you can do with it. Those two I think are my favorite, and probably upper body. I would say that hanging is my favorite because again, not just hanging, but the variety of ways you can hang. Uh, Even in terms of like getting into back bending, you can introduce yourself to like hanging cobra positions, and there's just like so much that you can do with that. I would say that those are, if I had to pick just one for upper lower, it would probably be those two things.
Those two.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm kind of like a following on from the squat. Like, are you? Do you subscribe to the idea that yeah, on the face of it, the squat looks like a very simple, basic movement. But do you subscribe to the view that the squat is actually something that requires a lot of coaching and a lot of cueing?
I think if you have specific goals, it would. So heavy back squatting, like if you want to get a heavy, strong back squat, it's going to require some coaching and feedback and getting an understanding of how to manage the weight. Also, how to manage areas during the squat that you need to focus on more. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think in that sense it does. But if your goal is just to be able to move well day to day, really do think it is as simple as just like squatting. Just,
Okay.
learning some mobility exercises and just learning how to get yourself closer to the ground. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
doing enough of that, that would be step one. And then
Mm-hmm.
see from there kind of thing. Cause I mean, that's a lost thing in, I think our culture, but it's still
Mm-hmm.
something where a lot of people just rest in their squats in other parts of the world. And if we train it enough and expose ourselves to it enough, it should feel, again, we put a lot of X's on certain patterns that, if you butt wink or whatever, then you're going to hurt yourself. But if you're getting yourself erased from that mindset, then I think it is as simple as just doing some squat work every day for
Mm-hmm.
most people. But if you're into trying to get really strong on a barbell squat, I think coaching specific things does come up for a lot of people.
Okay. Okay. And kind of like one last thing. What does your own training look like? You know, you put out a lot of information, a lot of videos,
Yeah.
but currently, what does your own training look like?
I basically rotate upper and lower body days. So keeps it simple. It allows me to have more options in a training session. And I have cardio focused days between that where I just go in. We're doing more kind of low grade zone two work, which is I've been doing that in the last couple of years more than I think I ever have. And I'll have a couple of higher threshold days through the week where I'll just go and do some sprint stuff or some higher intensity cardio work to be breathing harder. And it gives me a time to just mess around with some movement exercises as well, like some of the ground stuff, or just kind of explore my body a little bit, how it's feeling. But for the most part, it's a lower body day and an upper body day, and then repeat kind of thing. So you can imagine all the different ways that that looks, like how you
Mm,
could
mm.
create a session.
Nice one, nice one. Well, Lucas, I'm sure that anybody watching this, or most of the people watching this, are going to know who you are. But in terms of how people can get hold of you, those people that are new to, you know, that are seeing you for the first time, how do people get hold of you online? Where do they go to? What do they search?
Well, I think if you search range of strength, then all the different platforms will come up that I'm on. I'm on all social media platforms these days, but Instagram is where it all started. That's still where I
Mm,
drive more energy in terms of like a lot of the older stuff that you'll find if you wanted to deep dive. And I've been putting more energy into YouTube in the last year. There's some long form videos on there that I think if people like that kind of content, they can dive a bit deeper. But yeah, you just punch range of strength into the old Google search engine and you'll see a lot of the stuff come up.
nice one, nice one. Any more? Because I was on your channel earlier. Any more podcast stuff that you're putting out? Is that going to be more of a regular?
Yeah, I try to put out monthly podcasts and been trying to intertwine that with my YouTube. But tomorrow I am shooting just live. I've been doing some YouTube videos where I'm just shooting my workout and
Mm,
I go through whatever I'm doing that day. So I'm going to do that tomorrow with the bent press. So it's going to be talking about like the old time bent pressing stuff and some progressions and the ways that I train it and what I've learned. So yeah, each month I do try to push out a podcast episode or something long form on YouTube. Just sometimes harder to find the time, but I try.
the time. Yeah. Well, I highly recommend to people watching to watch the evolution of mobility training. That was informative and entertaining. I like that.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Especially the I like the I completely forgot about the film 300 and how that affected all of us
Yeah,
who were into fitness.
yeah,
You know, everyone wanted to look like them, right?
yeah. Well, I mean, it really did snowball, right? Because the Spartan race became popular.
Yeah.
CrossFit had their first CrossFit Games right after that movie, and
Hmm.
it was just like everyone wanted to go do all these things, and it was great, but everyone moved like shit. So
Yeah.
we were trying
Yeah.
to figure out how to
Yeah.
move. Yeah.
Yeah, and hence, you know, mobility people like you come in, man.
Over time, I think we've started to figure
Yeah,
it out, right? There's a lot of stuff back then where I was like, man, this is useless. I can't use this.
yeah. Oh man, well, Lucas, I want to thank you for your work, man. I want to thank you for the stuff that you're putting out. You help, particularly people like me who suddenly freeze when it comes to, you know, trying to kind of keep consistent with training. You know, you kind of spark creativity, which is another reason why, yeah, I kind of value creativity in sparking people's interest for fitness. So yeah, I want to thank you for that. And yeah, thank you for your time as well, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always I look forward to when Physical does get the energy going and stuff. Since the first day I started following you guys, the message just makes sense, right? Like get out, get moving, and think outside the box, right?
Cheers, bro. Thank you. Do you think one thing? Do you think we should carry on with podcasts? And is podcast the way to go
Well,
rather
I
than
think podcast
the reposting?
I think podcasts are a great way to push that message out because you can chop up a lot of different posts from it, right? Because we just
Hmm.
talked about so many different things. I mean,
Mm.
for your page, you could probably take 3 posts from it, that the things we talked about. So it makes it a bit easier in that sense to, keep some content sharing going for a little while. And
Hmm.
yeah, I love seeing like the message being shared with similar ideologies, and helps you find the people that are out there doing a lot of the stuff that you're into. And I think that's the most important thing.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks,
Yeah.
man. I need some direction. So yeah, I appreciate that advice, man.
Just
I
keep
do
going, man.
appreciate that. Thanks, man. Thanks. Well, Lucas, thank you, sir. What's the time over there?
We're at 10:30 a.m.
10 a.m. Okay. All right. I'm gonna leave you to the rest of your day, man.
Yeah.
Thanks again, and yeah. This will probably go up in the next couple of weeks. I've got some big life things happening at the moment, good things that is.
Good.
Yeah, which are gonna kind of get in the way. But yeah, in the next few weeks, this will be up.
Cool, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, take care, bro.
See you,
Thanks
man.
again.